Some images in this film are authentic historical records. Others are clearly labeled AI reconstructions, visualizing moments that no camera captured. At lunchtime, a steel tank split open, and 2.3 million gallons of molasses struck Boston at highway speed. The wave bent elevated railway girders, crushed buildings, and left 21 people dead before most residents understood what they were seeing. This was not a freak act of nature. It was a massive engineering failure that had been announcing itself for 4 years. Just after 12:40, workers and children filled the North End streets, enjoying an unusually mild break in Boston's winter. Beside the harbor stood a steel cylinder 50 feet tall and 90 feet wide, looming over homes, tracks, and workshops. It stored molasses bound for distilleries, turning an ordinary sugar byproduct into raw material for Boston's large industrial alcohol business. But long before the collapse, people living beside the tank had already discovered that its walls could not reliably hold their contents. Built in 1915, the tank began operating beside a crowded immigrant neighborhood where a major industrial failure would have nowhere safe to travel. Molasses seeped through its steel seams, forming visible trails down the walls and dark, sticky puddles around the structure's base. Children reportedly arrived with small containers, collecting the sweet leakage as if the tank were offering free candy instead of a warning. The tank also groaned and vibrated as its level changed, transforming routine filling operations into repeated demonstrations of structural distress. The tank also groaned and vibrated as its level changed, transforming routine filling operations into repeated demonstrations of structural distress. Inside any cylindrical tank, liquid pushes outward against the wall, with the greatest pressure concentrated near the lower steel plates. Those plates measured roughly 1/2 to 5/8 of an inch thick, while rivet holes created natural points for stress to concentrate. A weak structure can survive many loads before one hidden crack crosses a threshold. The final failure may be sudden, but never truly spontaneous. 2 days before the disaster, a fresh Caribbean shipment arrived, adding warmer molasses to material already chilled inside the tank. Researchers estimate the stored liquid remained about 5 degrees Celsius, warmer than the surrounding air when the structure finally failed. That temperature difference mattered twice. First for how readily the contents moved, then for what happened outside after the release. Near the bottom, immense outward force met thin plate, brittle steel, and stress around rivet holes where a crack could accelerate. Shortly after 12:40, the shell tore apart. Residents heard a deep rumble, followed by impacts as steel and rivets broke free. The collapsing wall released years of stored gravitational energy almost instantly, turning a stationary reservoir into a moving industrial disaster. Contemporary estimates describe a wave nearly 25 feet high, advancing faster than 50 feet every second through the North End. That speed seems impossible for something famous for moving slowly, but the answer lies in the changing physics of the molasses itself. Molasses is roughly 1 1/2 times as dense as water, giving every gallon more mass and every falling foot more destructive energy. Under relevant conditions, it can also be about 4,000 times more viscous, but viscosity does not mean a released reservoir stays still. Gravity drove millions of gallons outward across the waterfront, while the warmer interior initially offered less resistance to rapid spreading. Although molasses can thin slightly under strong motion, researchers found that this shear thinning effect was small during Boston's winter disaster. Temperature was far more important. Cooling molasses from 10 to 0 degrees Celsius can increase its viscosity by a factor of 3. So the leading edge could surge forward quickly, carrying steel fragments, vehicles, timber, and people through streets beside the harbor. Then the liquid spread thin, met cold air and ground, and thickened rapidly around anyone who had survived the first impact. The same substance arrived like a fast-moving wave and settled like a trap, helping explain 21 deaths and roughly 150 injuries. Boston police, Red Cross personnel, and cadets from the nearby USS Nantucket entered wreckage coated in dense, freezing, nearly opaque molasses. They pulled survivors from debris while every step resisted movement, as police and Red Cross teams worked across the destroyed waterfront. Engine 31's firehouse was shifted and damaged. Firefighter George Leahy, caught inside while resting, became one of the 21 victims. Fire crews from other American cities show how limited equipment was in that era, but these images are not footage of the flood. Cleanup workers eventually discovered that salt water pumped from Boston Harbor broke down the molasses more effectively than ordinary scrubbing. They covered streets with sand, washed residue toward the harbor, and worked for weeks while boots spread stickiness across the city. Newspaper front pages captured the scale of destruction, but photographs could only show what remained after the wave had passed. The tank owner offered a different explanation. Anarchists had bombed the structure, shifting attention from engineering warnings toward a feared political enemy. More than 100 claims were combined into a proceeding that tested whether a powerful corporation could be held accountable for neglected safety. The record grew to roughly 25,000 pages, with about 1,000 witnesses and 1,500 exhibits examining steel, explosives, and suffering. Court-appointed auditor Hugh Ogden spent approximately 5.5 years weighing those competing explanations before issuing his report in 1925. His conclusion rejected sabotage. The evidence pointed to an inadequate safety margin, ignored warnings, and negligence by the tank's owner. United States Industrial Alcohol ultimately paid about $628,000 in damages, an extraordinary corporate penalty for that era. Boston's response helped establish expectations that engineers sign plans, inspectors examine construction, and designers show the calculations behind public safety. Today, parkland occupies the former tank site, while the surviving photographs carefully preserve the aftermath that no moving camera recorded. The deadliest part of Boston's molasses wave was not its strangeness. It was how ordinary every ignored warning had become.